I was like 4, maybe. And I had like 3 friends that came over. They all had hearing parents, right? And my dad could talk, and so could my mom. My mom could, they went through speech school and everything. And I remember, like, I think my mom checked on us. She's like, "Hey, you guys doing okay? Like, you need any food or anything?" And then my friends started laughing when she started talking. And I was like, what's going on?
What did I miss here? What did I miss?
What are you laughing at?
Right.
And they just laughed. So, I mean, and they took that back to school. Like, they would like make jokes about how my parents would speak. And I remember I think it was that moment where I was like, oh, this is different.
Welcome to another great episode of Dre Smiley, The Inner Circle.
Great. How you doing, man? I'm always super happy. This is the way I am. I just wake up happy and everything. But it's really exciting when I get an opportunity to have someone on our show that I work with. Over a year ago, I met David through a business relationship with my company and his company. And over the year, we meet like once every 2 weeks and see what's going on in the project, which has been really cool. But over time, we finally had an opportunity to sit there and talk about each other. Like, what's your life about? What's your life about? And I found out that David is a fascinating person. He's bilingual. He does something that's just impressively amazing. And once I heard, I was like, David, will you be on the podcast? And guess what he said, Dre? He said yes.
What'd he say?
He said yes. I was like, what? He said yes.
Yeah.
So here we are. So let's kick off, David. I'm going to read a short bio. David, born in the 90s to 2 deaf parents, developed a unique understanding of communication from a young age. This bilingual upbringing fueled his passion for language, leading him to become a sign language interpreter in his early 20s. Today, David balances his career with the joys of fatherhood, raising a rambunctious 3-year-old alongside his wonderful wife. So we were talking, and he said that he was bilingual, and then he said he reads signs and everything. I was like, wow. So David, welcome to the podcast, and tell us about you.
Oof. Oh yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. I just where do I begin? I guess I'll begin with the 90s. You know, when I was born. It's interesting. So back in the day, in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of communication and access, right? I remember that as a kid. So I remember, going to a doctor's appointment and interpreting for my father right at the doctor's appointment. And if you think about it, like a little 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, think about your 6-year-old trying to tell you what the doctor says, right? Just think about that. So this would be what I'd be doing that. I would, as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, whatever, I'd be interpreting for my father for things that would happen at the doctor's appointment, would happen, in a religious way. We'd go and we'd go into the drive-through at like Wendy's, right? And then my mom would be like, "Okay, tell them what you order, what I want to order," and then she'd tell it to me, and I wouldn't understand everything, so I'd tell them everything. We'd go around and pick up the food, and my mom would be like, "Oh, this isn't right," but she never blamed me. She always blamed them. So she would. But the way that it was payback, though, is she'd be like, "David, come with me and interpret," and then she'd just yell at she'd be like, "Okay, you got to get this right." So life was just so different. If you see nowadays, everybody has like interpreting is so big. Accessibility is huge in Apple and big companies that are providing interpreters for their events, and there's just accessibility at the Super Bowl now. It's so different than what it used to be, but still, like, it's when you have that kind of an experience, you view the world just a little bit differently. You start to notice things. You start to realize, oh, that person isn't like in it. Let's bring them in. Let's make sure that they have what they need to be able to communicate or be involved in the conversation. So
when you mentioned 4 years of age, because think of it like this, because these are your parents, your mother and father are hearing challenged or hearing impaired. That's the correct way. And so at 3, when did you know that you were a translator? When did you know that you knew how to sign? Because their first forms of communication with you was via sign. And then, so how did you transition to the rest of the world? It's like, oh, this isn't normal for everyone. This is just my unique situation.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think I first remembered it, and this is kind of a more of a sad story, but I think I first remember like realized that I had different parents when I brought a friend over for the first time. I was like, "Hey, come on over. We're gonna like I don't know. I was like 4 maybe, and we were gonna have like just a little like friend party. Had like 3 friends that came over. They all had hearing parents, right? And my dad could talk, and so could my mom. My mom could. They both can talk. They both can speak pretty well. They went through speech school and everything. And I remember, like, I think my mom checked on us. She's like, "Hey, you guys doing okay? Like, you need any food or anything?" And then my friend started laughing when she started talking, and I was like, what's going on? Why are
Yeah,
you
what did
laughing?
I miss here? What did I miss?
What are
Yeah,
you laughing at?"
right.
And they just laughed. So I mean, and they took that back to the school. Like they would like make jokes about how my parents would speak. And I remember it was that I think it was that moment where I was like, "Oh, this is different. This is not
Yeah,
similar to anything else." So I think that was my moment. I started probably interpreting for my parents regularly. I don't know. I'd say like 6 or 7 is when I started to go out with my parents and do that. But that was 4 was when I really realized that my parents were different than other parents.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that has to have a impact, right? As a kid, a couple
Mm.
things you've shared that I connect with. One is, or I'm curious about, because I haven't experienced it, but you mentioned at a young age, 6 years old, you were handed, you were tasked with the responsibility of translating in these really important situations, whether it's, you know, in the religion, the church, at the doctor's office, casually in restaurants, things like that. At such a young age, I'm curious, how does that impact or shape your perspective on communication in general? How do you think
Mm.
that has impacted you on communication in general?
Oh man, it's huge. Yeah, so I think there's 2 routes to this. And I think that I took both, right? So I think there's when you grow up that way, you self wallow and you're like, oh man, I had to do so much for my parent. Like I had to be a parent to my parents. That was really hard. And that was totally my thought process. It really, and I'm being honest, like just growing up, that's how I treated my parents. That's how I thought about my parents. And I went on sign language mission. So I went proselyting as a missionary in sign language. And so I went through that process and I fell in love with deaf culture there. So deaf culture, sign language, interpretation, all of that. So that's kind of where my perception and my healing came from because it was I was just with my parents before. I just interpreted for my parents. I was relied on to do that because there was nobody else at times. Like it was just you go to the doctors, they don't have an interpreter for you. What do? Right? I need to understand somehow. Can you help me, David? Right? And other situations, right? That are uncomfortable, like ecclesiastical situations or church situations where my dad was like, I don't have an interpreter. I have to tell some really hard things that I've been doing to my leader. David, could you come interpret for that? And as a child, seeing your dad in that kind of a vulnerable situation, right? It's
Right, yeah.
so those kind of situations led me to be like, no, I'm kind of a parent to my parents, kind of flipped the balance or flipped the power structure, right? And so I went on that mission and I saw other parents that were kind of doing that with their kids. I kind of stepped in and I just kind of helped out. I was like, no, I can interpret for you. They don't need to do that. I can do that. I can kind of be that person. And I think that shaped me and my love for deaf people from my mission shaped me into taking this other path of no, those experiences didn't make me a parent to my parents. That was just what happened, right? But those experiences actually helped me gain perspective into what accessibility really looks like. What is equal or what is equivalent communication? Like if I'm talking to you in English, both of us are adept in English to be able to understand each other perfectly, pretty much 100% of the way, unless I use words that are just weird. Sometimes I do that, right?
Right.
Or if I'm talking to a PhD person, they're using big words. I don't know, but what is that? What is equivalent to that, right? And I think it's somebody that I think it's being able to have an interpreter who's had life experiences and who's worked on their craft to a point where it's right there, right? A 6-year-old kid's never going to be able to do that, you know? and it's not a good experience for them. It's not a good experience for the parent. So that's something that, like, I work on my craft with sign language every day. I just got, somebody told me, they were like, we need an interpreter for a little girl that's going to be playing basketball. And I was like, I've played basketball my entire life. I was
I'll
like,
do it.
I am there.
Right.
And I went in, I did my first appointment with her, and it was beautiful. Like, I was just like, I was able to use the correct terminology, that I was able to show what, bouncing a basketball or passing it, or, do this or do that. Like, it's so beautiful when you have that kind of connection to what you're doing as an interpreter, so that you're able to relay the information in such a pure way. And when they get it, when they understand it, like when the light bulb goes off instantly after you sign it to them, oh my God, there's nothing better in the world. Like,
Right.
it's like it's just this beautiful moment where you're just like, oh my gosh, we connect, we work. And so, anyways, I think, to answer your question, I think there's two paths that you can take with that in my situation, and I've seen that with other codas. Codas are child of deaf adults.
Mm.
There's two paths you can take. And the ones that take this, I'm a parent to my parent, my trauma really hit me hard, and I can't get past that. That they really have a hard time, and they actually end up hating the community. They hate, the deaf community. They don't want to be interpreters. They struggle with that. I think if you take this other way, you can still be an ally. You don't have to be an interpreter to be an ally. But if you take this other route, I think that it can transform you into somebody that can really make an impact.
Yeah, I can easily imagine being a coda, how challenging that would be, right? Like you were
Yeah.
saying, the average, or perhaps not the average, but some children who are tasked with that responsibility could have this bitterness. It sounds like for you, one path out of that bitterness was that mission trip where you had a new community, right? That you could connect with
Mm.
and say, "Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one dealing with. They understand what I'm saying." So for you, that was
Yep.
kind of a point of transition for you. So it's great that you had that opportunity. You mentioned also at the top that communication access really wasn't a thing in the 90s growing up, right?
Mm.
Going to the hospital, that sort of thing. And I reflect back on my daughter being, and she's 14 now. I believe she was in the second, third grade. And most schools offer French, Spanish, but her school, interestingly enough, offered sign language. And so she signed up for it. And it was really fascinating seeing her, use these signs. We went out to somewhere to eat, and someone was in line with a shirt that said you know, something about sign language or something. And so I
Yeah.
mentioned, oh yeah, my daughter knows how to sign. And so the person was like, "Oh yeah, I really do." So they started signing it. I was standing like a proud pop. I was like, "That's my daughter. Look at her do her
Yeah.
thing." I didn't
That's what I'm
understand
talking
anything she
about.
was saying, but I was proud of her. So something else, and I'll pass it over to Smiley here in a second. Something else I've noticed is that in so many different arenas, you see people doing sign. And the most
Mm.
interesting for me is seeing concerts where they have someone on the side of the stage signing. Not only are they signing, David, and maybe you've done this, I know you've seen this, but they're like
Yeah.
getting into the music, So I'm like,
Yes.
okay, this is another level for the person who's deaf, right? They not only can understand the lyrics, but they can actually feel the connection with the band because this person's not standing there stiff as a board signing. They're actually moving to the music and that sort of thing. Tell me your thoughts about how it's evolved, interpreters and the use of them, how it's evolved over the years. And I'll pass over to Smiley.
I have so many thoughts on this. It's such a
Share
good
them all.
question. Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting away from the industry of interpretation is getting, it went from a ton of generalists who did everything, right? Now it's zoning into lots of specialists. We have enough interpreters now so that interpreters can just be specialists in their field, right? It's amazing. So that's when you see, and the best music interpreter that I know of is Amber Gallego, who's hard of hearing. She has the pink hair. I don't know, maybe you've seen her. She does concert interpreting, and she does the guitar, and she'll go up,
I've
and
seen
she
her.
does
I've
it.
seen her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And she
Yeah.
like there's a different is so different. I can't do music interpreting like that. I just can't. I don't try, right? I'm not that kind of person, which I think it's beautiful what she's done. She's perfected her craft over the years. She has a whole network of interpreters under her that she trains and teaches and does it. She actually does the Super Bowl as well. She helps out with that too. So Amber is amazing. And then there's like theater interpreting. We now have specialized theater interpreters who they study Shakespeare like all year round. Like, and then they go to a Shakespeare festival and they get into it. It's a beautiful thing. And what this is allowed for is it's allowed for deaf mentors. So people who are deaf go and they mentor these hearing or hard of hearing interpreters, and they help them with the source text, or they help them with, oh, that's good, that's good, maybe do this better, maybe do that. And it's provided, again, this equivalent access experience that is just a more beautiful. So yeah, no, I love Amber. I love these like music interpreters that come in. The one thing that I will say, so there's also comedy interpreters that are really good with comedy. They go in and they do the comedy sets. Comedians love using them for like a joke. Like it's like every single time I see an interpreter, I go to a comedian with like an interpreter present. They'll like speak expletives and just like watch the interpreter. There's one time, so I like doing comedy. I like that. That's one of my specialties that I bring in. And there was one comedian that just like, he sat like right up to my face. Like he's just looking at me. And then he was like, and then she pooped a pineapple. And then he just smiled and then just watched
Just waiting for you.
So I like signed pooped a pineapple, and he was like, that's exactly what I thought it would be. Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing, man?
That
She's
sounds
like,
like
I do
just a
that
good
to every
time.
interpreter. Yeah, I do that to every interpreter. And I was like,
Right.
man, don't do that again.
I love it.
Um,
I love it.
this is so fascinating because I would like to get into, if we can, the business of interpreting. Meaning, you
Oh yeah.
mentioned it was general, and now it gets into specific, and you talked about a little bit about how it was a little challenging in the '90s. But where do you see the business of interpreting today? A, what is it? And B, where do you see
Mm.
it 10 years from now?
Ooh. Oh man, that's a good question. You guys are asking such good questions today. All things that I've been thinking about. So I'm like, I have responses to all of these. So back in the 90s, it was a lot of, so okay, so setting this up, the 1960s is where we started seeing our first interpreters, right? That's when the National Interpretation Committee and registration for or interpreters for the deaf kind of mandated these interpreters to start, had a certification process anyways. And so they started interpreting for colleges or things like that, right? Education things. The government got them in, started interpreting for those kind of events. And then it's moved up, right? So these individual interpreters that were, hired by committees. And then in the 90s and early 2000s, agencies started being formed, right? So you have the big Sorensen Communications, which is a video relay service company, did that. And then there's like these like mom and pop agencies that started popping up throughout the nation. Fast forward a couple like to COVID. COVID really exploded some agencies. It shut down some agencies, but then it exploded others. So COVID really provided this like need for video remote interpreting. They call it VRI. And it was pretty much like, we need an interpreter to be able to get on their computer, just like we're doing right now, and sign in a Zoom session, right? Or sign in a whatever. Some like companies that were based in Utah started doing appointments in Washington, D.C. that other agencies in Washington, D.C. used to do, but they just didn't have the bandwidth to provide VRI, right? So then those companies started exploding everywhere. So now we have a few companies that are big, I think, in each state, and not as many mom and pop agencies. Now, where I think it should go and where it is going is two different things. Where I think it should go is I think that we should have individuals like me directly connecting to businesses, individuals directly connecting with businesses. Agencies, what they do is they may charge $200, right? and then they pay an interpreter 40 or 50, right? They get that huge, right? And so the rest of the people that are contracting with agencies are like, oh my gosh, that's expensive. Interpreting is expensive. I don't know if I can pay that. And then they try to do everything that they can to not pay that sometimes, even
Mm.
though they get tax credits and stuff like that. But if you directly contract with me, it's significantly less, right? It's not going to be, because they, the agencies have to have an overhead to pay. They got to pay schedulers, they got to pay their executive team, they got to pay their interpreters. They got all those things to do, which just, it totally makes sense. And agencies really do a lot of work into, hey, you need to provide accessibility. But I think that the problem with the agencies are that it's almost like a let's get a body in the seat kind of a thing. There's some agencies that don't do that. One of my cousin runs a business right now, and he's doing fantastic. 5-star interpreting. He allows the deaf person to make a preference list of who the deaf person wants, right? Okay, these I want these 5. Okay, this person's not available, this person's not available, they're doing something else. But this person is available, so we're going to give you that person. Other agencies don't do that. They're just like, let's put a body in the seat. Let's have that person interpret for you. And maybe that's not their specialty, right? And so that's why I think it should go away from that. Maybe keep the agencies that are doing the right thing. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, well, let's say a person is hearing impaired and they say, I'm going to a doctor appointment. Would I contract you to be on the Zoom call, or would you come and assist me with that? Or maybe I'm going on a vacation and I'm going to go to another part of the country and I'm going to be at a family reunion. Do we contract you as an agent, like a RN, like a assigned nurse to the person? Or is it, it's like a lawyer, you're on demand and I just call you when I need some interpretation?
Yeah, both. It can be both. Usually on demand. So yeah, usually you call that person. There's a registry list on the RID website, Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. They have a list of all of the interpreters that are certified. And then locally, state-wise, there's usually a certification process. Utah has a separate certification outside of the national certification, where they have a list as well that you can reach out to them. But yeah, so that's how that goes. But it's usually the interpreters that are very aggressive trying to get contracts, which is what I was before I started working with my company. I was like, let's get as many contracts as I can outside of an agency, right? But where I see it going in 10 years is, I don't know if you've seen AI and how AI has been going with the sign language. So I thought for sure AI with sign language would be like 30, 40, 50 years out, because there's the expressions, there's the nuance of sign language that isn't as easily tapped in to other languages. Like Spanish, you can do an AI translator for Spanish, even today, probably. I don't know how effective that would be. I'm sorry if I'm offending any Spanish translators out there. I'm sure you're better than the AI model, but there's enough data out there for Spanish translators, I'm sure. But with sign language, I see in the next 5 years, we have a solution through AI that does static language to sign language, right? So like that does like the Pledge of Allegiance translated into AI translator for deaf people, or the government writes something out for an emergency message. They feed it to the AI, and then the AI translator does it for anybody around the nation that needs it. I see that in the next 5 to 10 years for sure. Now, how aggressive they are with the AI modeling, and I don't know. I hope that they don't, because I love having my little side job and my little side business. I love that. It would put me out of a job, but I could see, and with what they have already with this AI model, it looks great. So all they really need to do is figure out how to get the input from English or whatever language, and then be able to use that input to do sign language, and do that in a more naturally flowing way. I don't know how they're going to do that. It's going to be hard. There's going to be some trial and error. It's not going to be as good as a human interpreter for the next 5 to 10 years, but in 10 years, or maybe a little after 10 years, I could see them figuring it out. AI is going fast. So
Switching
yeah.
gears, just a slight digression. With your technical background, because you and I met through a technical space, I work for software, you work for software, your age and experience and your sign language, why don't you do the AI and you be the next Zuckerberg of
There you
sign
go.
languages? Because you're
That's
talking about the
that's
comedians. I
true.
don't think you got access to technical people. You know how to do structures. You know how software SaaS companies work. Dude,
Yeah.
Dre got 50 million to invest into your company right now. I got 10% of what Dre got. So that's a lot of money right there.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you want to go in business, Kevin? I don't
I'm sorry. Back to the show at hand.
know.
but seriously, David, right. Along that same vein, though, in terms of starting your own, have you really have you ever considered that? Kind of just looking at how you can leverage technology, like Smiley was saying. Have you ever thought about how you yourself can leverage it?
I've thought a lot about it. Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. More so, so the big thing that I'm interested in is emergency respondedness, right? So my
Mm.
dad is over in the state of Washington. He's over that. He's over emergency messaging and sending that out to deaf people. And I asked him, I was like, how long does it take to get an emergency message out to the deaf people in sign language? And he said it really depends, but usually like 12 hours to 24, right? And you're
That
thinking
sounds like a
like,
long
yeah,
time.
yeah. So they get the text, but like 12 to 24 hours, like, that's missing the boat, right? You know, like,
Yeah.
hey, a tsunami's coming in this
Right.
area,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Usually when they
they're,
say that, the tsunami isn't coming in 3 days. They usually don't send an emergency message, that's happening 5 days from now. It's
yeah. It's like
by definition, it's around the corner. It's like in the next 15 minutes. So yeah,
it's a high
interesting.
ground, right?
It's
I
a
was
high
like, yeah,
ground.
they're swimming in 12 to 24 hours.
It's like while they're swimming in the tsunami, ding 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 ding.
That's
Snap.
yeah.
This is what's going on right now. The tsunami.
Yeah, this would have been nice to know 12 hours ago. Yeah.
12 hours ago. But yeah, so talk to me about that. That's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's a long time. And that's all it's all dependent on what interpreters they have available to be able to create something, get it in the studio, edit it, whatever, however they want to do that, and then reproduce it. And so a big thing for me is AI modeling, right? I think that that's the way we should go. I think that not to take away jobs from certified deaf interpreters, because that's the ones that do these. We need immediate access to information. We just need that. So I think that like if I was to do a business, which sounds like maybe that's a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You
I
got
would
two
love to
business
do that.
partners right here.
Yeah.
David, you have as Liam Nelson says, you have a unique set of skills.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
do.
Liam said
Yeah.
Yeah,
you have
you
a
Yeah.
do.
unique set of skills.
I,
Yeah.
I will find you. Yeah.
And interpret for you.
Yeah.
But so break that down again. So you mentioned that what happens is in situations like that, they have to go into a studio, they have to find an
Mhm.
interpreter, go into a studio, and create. So what I'm envisioning, because obviously this is brand new to me. What I
Yeah.
was envisioning beforehand is that there was some message they would send out, but it would be sent in text form. But what it sounds like is that they actually send a video out of someone interpreting the message. Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
it's like a link. It's like a link to a video. So what they would, it's like a YouTube link. Yeah.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha.
what they'll do is they'll get the message from the government. Hey, this is happening. The accessibility team will then reach out to whoever's available. Usually they have their own in-house studio that they go to.
Okay, okay.
They might need something, but they'll go to their in-house studio. They'll sign it. They'll send them the video file back, and then the accessibility team will do whatever editing they need to do, and then send it out to the public, right? In a YouTube link.
Wow.
So that's that's how they do it right now. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's it gonna look like, in the next couple of years.
With AI.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't, yeah. Well, with AI, like I could see, yeah, I could see it in the next too with how far they've gotten already.
Yeah, 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 for sure, for
So
sure.
yeah, maybe yeah, I don't know. There's a great model in the UK right now that they're working on. They're doing awesome stuff with it. That's who's been creating that right now. And then Gallaudet University is I think working on their own AI model. Yeah, maybe I need to do my own. Be like,
Something to think
hey
about.
Utah.
Yeah, I have something to say. Yeah, let me sign it to you. So let me ask you this: for those that might be interested in
Hmm.
getting into signing, interpreting, two questions. One is, well, actually, before I ask that, how do you stay relevant? How do you stay on top of things? You mentioned earlier that you practice frequently, but
Mhm.
what do you do to make sure you have it all down? You know,
Mhm.
because like you said, you may come across a PhD comic. You may come across,
Yeah.
someone who's like, David, I heard you on the Dre Smiley podcast. We have a band. I know you don't do music, but the way you sounded so well on that podcast, you're the guy we want. How do you prepare for these things that are unexpected? How do you stay on top of your game?
Oof, that's a good question. What I do is, and I don't know if every other interpreter has this. Sometimes as an interpreter, you're just doing this all the time. You're interpreting, interpreting, interpreting. For jobs now that I get, I spend a significant amount of time studying outside of that job. I'll research. What I do is I research all the relevant, um, uh, this is one of those moments where I'm like having a brain fart on what word it is in English. All the relevant buzzwords, right, for that
Okay.
specific profession or
Okay.
that specific job or something like that. So I'll do
Okay.
some research if I'm preparing for a job. But no, staying relevant in sign language is a lot of you've got to be in the community, right? So I think I know a lot of ASL professors that I see on a regular basis, and I ask them. I'm like, hey, I saw this sign. What is that? Like, tell me about that. I will. I'll watch ASL news. So I'll watch news in ASL. There's a guy, Daily Moth. He does ASL news daily, and he talks about the political climate. He talks about what's happening between Trump and Kamala. He'll talk about all of those things in sign language. So I'll pick up some words that I maybe don't know or haven't seen before. So stuff like that.
Okay.
Anything ASL, I try to consume as much as possible. There might be a TED talk that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm watching that if it's an ASL, right?
Yeah.
There've been
Yeah.
a few.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do. I'll try and practice outside. I'll do some interpreting practice outside of it. I'm doing it right now. Like while I'm listening to you guys, in my head, I'm also interpreting. So it's a daily practice and a daily thing that when I talk to people, I'll think about it while I'm talking to them. How would I interpret this or how would I translate this? It's just a muscle that I don't even like. Sometimes I don't even know I'm doing it. Like it just does it, right? Like it just goes and goes. So.
Have you ever needed to do your interpreting in your professional setting with, they say, your 9 to 5, your primary job? Like you just happen to come across someone and you're like, oh, there's sign language too, or how do you identify other interpreters, or is it something that's like, oh, he can play basketball, or I'm from Utah, he's from Utah, or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah, every single time I go to any job. So at my current job, I was like, how are we providing accessibility? That's my first question at any job that I go to. Like even in the interview, sometimes I'll ask that. How are we providing accessibility? How can we? And we actually have at my current job ASL content that I've created just in case, right? And just in case we go and then there are a couple of ASL companies that I'm like, hey, we could look into selling into them, and we've tried that. We're going through that process right now, but that's always what I'm looking for. Seeing other interpreters, that's a good question. I have a lot of interpreter friends. I probably know most of the interpreters in Utah. What I really look for though is I look for codas. That's who I look for. That's my people, right? The thing I didn't talk about before was there's two different there's deaf culture, right? And then there's coda culture. And I didn't know there was coda culture. And I remember I didn't grow up near other codas. My parents got divorced when I was 8. So like I hung out with other kids that had deaf parents as well. But from 8 on to like 18, 19, 20, I didn't. There was nobody around. We went to a town called Olympia, Washington. It's actually the capital. It's not really a town, but Seattle's really the capital of Washington, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And in Olympia, there were no other deaf kids, or there are CODA kids. There's no other kids with deaf parents. And so I I remember coming home from my mission trip, you know, I came home and I was like, I want to be in this community. And I started meeting other 20-year-old, 21, 22-year-old people that had deaf parents. And that connection coda to coda is just, I can't describe it. Like, it's just like I know who you are. I don't know the deaf experience, you know. I didn't grow up like my dad did with a hearing family, and he was the only deaf person in that family, and he had to learn how to speak. He didn't know anything what they were talking about half the time, right? But coda to coda is a different experience. And when I realized that and how rich that culture is, I just wanted nothing else I wanted to be as among my people as I
Yeah.
possibly could be. And there's gatherings, you know, they get together, they do stuff together. I didn't know that, right? So that might have been off your question, Smiley. I'm sorry, but I look for those people. I look for those people that are like me, and I didn't realize how important that was earlier on in my life, and I know how important it is now. It's a beautiful thing.
Are there Coda podcasts or Coda Instagram, TikTok channels, or is it taking over on social media? The Coda, because I've never heard that expression until this
Yeah,
morning. So is it
yeah.
that pervasive?
TikTok and Instagram, yes, yeah. There's codas all over the place on it. There's one guy that actually does a lot of I don't remember his name, but he like reports on sign language events that happen, you know, and he gives his opinion, like sign language in movies or sign language in plays, and he talks about it. But there's a lot of codas that have done that. I don't think there's a coda podcast. That might be a good idea. Maybe I'll do a Dre and Smiley coda.
There you go.
There
We
it
love we'd love to get on there and offer our 2 cents.
is.
Yeah. Well, we just got to use. Yeah, I love your branding. If I can just use your branding, maybe just be like,
You
"Hey, here's
got
Dre
it.
and Smiley." You know, maybe
You
I'll get
got it.
people to come.
You got it. Hey, one comment as you were sharing, David, about how invaluable it is to have that community of
Mm,
the network where you can go and kind of commiserate and kind of share ideas and thoughts and that sort of thing. I think about you mentioned playing ball growing up. I
mm.
think it's similar to like what positions did you play, for example? Do you know what
Point
position?
guard.
Point. I was going to use the point guard.
Yeah,
So let's
yeah.
say you're a point guard, and obviously you run the team. You kind of run
Mm,
the point and all that. But to really be the best point guard possible, it's really important for you to connect with other point guards, and you guys can talk
that's true.
about things that the forward, the center, they really can't relate to. As
No.
much as they try, you can talk about, man, every time I bring the ball up the court, no one's in their position. They don't read. No one's going to really hear that as well as another point guard. And so, as you
Yeah.
shared about how important it wasn't for you to connect with these other codas, I thought about that how sometimes you have to step out of the larger community into like a subset of that community that it's,
Mm,
that allows you to grow and be the best point guard you can possibly be, and then come back to that larger community, and now you can rock and roll, right? Because you've gotten more tips and tricks, you've been able to let some things off your chest and that sort of thing. So that's what came to mind when you mentioned how you get these communities and how important it is to you.
that's a beautiful analogy. I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, man.
Helping me connect. That's
Smiley.
really cool.
I was telling Dre plays basketball because you can't see how tall we are on the. I've never met David in person, but I've been with him for a year. But
Yeah,
I
I'm
told
I'm
us
6'4".
There you
Yeah.
go. Hey, you're on video. Make it 6'7". Make it 6'7".
I tell people off the basketball court I'm 5'11", but on the basketball court I'm about 6'2", and that's the way I
Yeah.
play. But now I'm in my ladies. I got bad knees, so I can't dunk on Dre anymore like I could have when we was young. But so I gotta leave it back to the memories because it's just what happens.
Hey, that's all right, Smiley. So we get a chance to show David the videos and the pictures of you dunking.
Yeah, but that
Well,
was
I want to see
pre-internet.
that. Yeah.
That was pre-internet and pre-cell phones, so I don't even have documented history of it. And then both of my dunked on, they go,
Everybody you played with is dead or in prison, right?
Yeah.
"You know,
You scored. You scored 100 points like Wilt too, right?
That's
You know,
right. That's right. That's right. You know it. You know it.
Dre, Dre doesn't believe me that year that Michael Jordan got cut when he was playing high school ball. That's when I schooled him, and then he came back. Because there was no one to record that Jordan that go way back. And I was in Chicago, and that way people just don't remember. But Jordan
yeah,
knows. If this is the Jordan,
yeah.
Jordan knows. Hey,
Just
Jordan
him.
knows.
Yeah,
yeah, Jordan knows. That's all that matters. Jordan knows.
It's between
yeah.
me, Jordan, God, and the devil. That's all it is. That's all we need.
I think I hear some rumors, something about that.
Right,
I'm,
right, right. It's out there in the
I'm not
ethers. It's out there in the ethers.
a mystery player, basketball player that no one talks about. That's me.
That's you. That's Smiley. That's Smiley.
I love
Yeah,
Before
it.
we go
man.
into the final four, David, are there any questions we didn't ask you that you wanted us to ask you before we move into final four? Or
No, I think this was, yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, let's move
All
to the final
right.
four. This sounds good. Hey, all right.
Yeah.
all right, so the first final four question is: what is something that never fails to make you laugh? You just hold your side, your tears coming down, you just can't stop laughing.
Oh man. So my mom's not super great with English, right? And she'll text me, just if she doesn't want to talk to me over video, she'll text me like a string of English words, and I'm like, "What is this, mom?" And when I got married, she started texting my wife that, and my wife was like, "What is your mom saying?" And you have to sign it in your head. That makes me
Right.
laugh every single time. It's so funny.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh, gosh, I remember thinking about this before, but now I'm like, when it's in a string, like I just can't think. Best piece of advice I've ever received is to write 100 things that you want to accomplish or want to do in your life. And as you do them, check in on it every year or every 3 months, and start crossing them off. If you want to live a happy life, I think that's what you do.
Mm,
I like
nice.
that. I've never heard of that before. Have you, Dre?
Yeah.
I like that.
No, I like
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, I like that
yeah,
too. All right, here's
yeah.
one. The third final four. Alive or dead? Who do you want to spend 24 hours with and why? Alive or dead?
Alive or dead? 24 hours. Hmm. I would. I would love. These are good questions. I think I would love to spend 24 hours with. Hmm. You start thinking about people you love, and you're like, maybe I want to spend time with them too. And then you start thinking about
Yeah.
like business people, and you're like, oh man, maybe that'd be a good one too.
Right, 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 right.
Business wise, I'd love to spend 24 hours with Warren Buffett and just talk to
Oh,
him about like, economical climate, what's some advice on investing? How did you become who you are? How did Berkshire become what they are? Right. So I think I'd probably do Warren Buffett, but people I love, I'm gonna do a second part to that question is I'd spend 24 hours with my grandma. She
oh
passed
yeah.
away. Passed away. I wasn't able to speak to her. It was during my mission trip
Uh,
that she passed away, and she was a big influence in my life. I'd love to spend 24 with her. So
yeah. Love it.
yeah,
Love it. What's the biggest challenge that you've ever faced? Ever overcome?
that's a good biggest challenge that I've ever overcome. I think that the biggest challenge I've ever overcome is I think divorce. I think
Mm,
going through and navigating divorce as a kid is a big challenge. And I think that there's a sub question or a sub challenge with that is respecting your parents and figuring out how to get back to respecting your parents in a way that they should be respected was a challenge. I think that it got to when you hear about things, when you realize things, and I think the biggest thing as a divorce, if I was to tell any divorced kid or parent, I think having an honest conversation with your parent and with your kid about what happened and really just like reemphasize love and reemphasize, as a kid, maybe reemphasize, I want you to be a parent in my life, and the parent, I want you to be in my life, and I'm going to do everything I can to get you in my life. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to reignite that relationship. It's probably a couple years ago that I really was able to have that honest conversation with my dad and figure that out. So probably divorce. Yeah.
Yeah. As you share that, David, I'm thinking about how adversity, how it builds character.
Mm.
It's they say diamonds are created through pressure. You're fortunate, man, and that your upbringing, your childhood provided so many great opportunities for you, in my mind, in terms of
Yeah.
challenges, a little bit of adversity. I'm sure there was a lot of I'm sure 99% of it was just love and normal that type of thing. But in one
Mm.
sense, man, you're really fortunate that you had these great opportunities to draw upon as you could move throughout the rest of your life. So, yeah, man, this is wow. Yeah, okay. Smiley.
No, I was going to say,
100%
David,
agree. Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
this has been fascinating. Like I said, Dre, when I started this podcast, I meet with David every 2 weeks for the past 12 months, and I don't know what it was. He said something, and we got into what he
Sorry you had to go
does.
through that, David.
He's the one I pay him to talk to me, so it's a contract. So this is the first
If he
time
wasn't
he.
his $100 bill, David, you better be on the call next week.
Yeah, Dre, let's set something.
So I'm super honored, Dre, because this is his first time waking up early in the morning to talk to me for free. So I'm like, wow. So I'm
Yeah.
very honored. And I didn't know he was a basketball player throughout the whole year. And I just recently found out about his
Yeah.
interpreting. So, David, this has been fascinating. We really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thanks for your authenticity, your genuineness. Thanks for exposing myself and I'm sure Dre to a whole new world and culture. There was words
Yeah.
coda I've never heard of, or even the names the Amber, Gia, whomever you said. I've never heard of these people, so they're on our radar now. So thank you very much for everything you've shared.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for your time,
Yeah,
Awesome.
man.
much love. Thanks,
For
guys.
sure.
All
All right, for sure.
right.